So a bill has been proposed in California which will require all law enforcement agencies to have microstamped handguns. This will also affect the safe handgun roster, ultimately restricting the handguns that law-abiding individuals could have as well. So let's talk about this. But real quick before we jump into this video, if you think that California's safe handgun roster violates our Second Amendment rights, go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe. I also want to give a shout out to one of the main sponsors of the channel, that is USCCA. Through your membership, you get training, education, and self-defense liability protection. So if you carry a firearm, I highly recommend you look into legal protection. I recommend USCCA, and I'll put a link to them down in the details section. So like I said in the intro, a new bill has been proposed in California which will require all law enforcement agencies to have handguns that have microstamping. Let's talk about this bill, which is AB 876, what it does, and some of the broader implications it will have on us law-abiding individuals and the handguns that we will have accessible to us if this were to pass. So I'll put a link to everything I'm going to talk about in this video down in the details section if you want to reference it for yourself. So the first thing that this will do is it will add a new section to the penal code. And this new section that's of most importance to this video is the new penal code 13660. And what this says is that all handguns purchased or acquired on or after July 1st of 2023, which are, and they talk about a subdivision description of the handguns, shall within 90 days of purchase or acquisition be equipped with a microscopic array of characteristics used to identify the make, model, and serial number of the handgun, etched or otherwise imprinted in one or more places on the interior surface or internal working parts of the handgun, and that are transferred by imprinting on each cartridge case when the firearm is fired. So what they're talking about there is microstamping, and the requirement will be that as of July 1st of 2023, any law enforcement agency that has handguns and acquires handguns after that date, they must be handguns that have microstamping. So the first main concerning thing that this bill does is it puts a law enforcement requirement that they have handguns that are microstamped. Now, another thing that this bill does that's kind of sneaky is it goes back to the old rule of having 2 microstamp places on a spent casing versus the one which was changed recently last year in AB 2847. The old rule was that you had to have 2 markings on a spent casing. That was amended to 1 in AB 2847. Now in this new subsection 6, it's saying that they're going to go back to 2 until July 1st of 2022. So along with requiring law enforcement agencies having to have microstamped handguns, they're also going to revert things back to the old rule of having 2 microstamping places that was recently changed last year. Now, another thing that this bill does that I want to talk about, and then we'll get to some of the broader impacts that this bill will have on us, the ordinary citizens in California. This bill has some language in here that says that law enforcement agencies can get reimbursed by the state for some things, and they will not get reimbursed for some other things. And this is important because it's going to be very costly for law enforcement agencies to get big manufacturers like Glock, like Smith & Wesson, whoever, to manufacture handguns with microstamping on them. It's just going to be crazy expensive. So the law enforcement agencies are not going to want to bear the entire cost of that. Instead, they're going to seek reimbursement back from the state of California. So ultimately, this is going to come down to taxpayers having to pay the state of California a ton of money, the state then taking that money, giving it back to law enforcement agencies so that they can then go buy these handguns from manufacturers because it's going to be crazy expensive for them to adhere to this bill. Now, that's one aspect of how ordinary individuals in California are going to be impacted by this bill. But other things are going to happen as well, and this is coming out of AB 2847 because AB 2847 had that requirement for every 1 handgun that is added to the roster, 3 of the oldest ones had to be removed if those 3 did not adhere with being drop safe, having a loaded chamber indicator, as well as having microstamping. There are a ton of guns on the safe handgun roster that do not have all these requirements, and they've been essentially just grandfathered in. For example, Glock Gen 3s are on that list. So if new guns are added to the safe handgun roster, eventually guns like the Glock Gen 3 will be removed. Now, one of the things that was discussed a lot when AB 2847 was passed is that there are pretty much no manufacturers that make handguns with microstamping, so no handguns would potentially be added to the safe handgun roster. Well, that's not necessarily going to be the case anymore because this bill will mandate law enforcement agencies to buy handguns with microstamping, and it's going to incentivize manufacturers to make those handguns, sell them to these agencies, and get those handguns put on the roster. And when those handguns get put on the roster, 3 of your favorite ones that aren't adhering to California's laws will be removed, like the Glock Gen 3s. So you can see why this is potentially concerning, because that prior bill, AB 2847, had the mechanism to remove handguns off the roster, but it was unlikely that manufacturers would be making these handguns with microstamping and that they would ultimately end up on the roster. Well, that's not the case anymore, because law enforcement agencies are going to be mandated to actually get these handguns, and manufacturers will make them and sell them to the state of California law enforcement agencies at a premium, and the state of California will reimburse these law enforcement agencies. And so these law enforcement agencies don't really care, because they're going to do it anyways because they're going to be reimbursed. I also just wanted to read you some quotes real quick from the genius assemblyman who has proposed this. So, in collaboration with Team Enough and the Brady campaign, Assemblymember Jesse Gabriel of Woodland Hills announced new legislation today that would make California the first state in the nation to require firearms used by law enforcement to include microstamping technology. And so here's a quote from the Assemblymember. "For too long, gun manufacturers have prioritized ideology over safety and fought common sense efforts to incorporate microstamping technology into new firearms. Our legislation will allow California to use its market power to overcome this obstinance and dramatically expand the use of this important technology. In so doing, we will create new markets for microstamped guns, help law enforcement solve violent crimes, ensure our police are equipped with the better and safer firearms, and bring more accountability and transparency to situations where there has been an officer-involved shooting." What's important there is they say that they are going to use the state of California's market power, and that's exactly what they're doing. They're requiring all law enforcement agencies having to adhere to this, and when they are going to have to adhere to this and have to go try and find these handguns from manufacturers, these manufacturers will make these microstamped handguns, because it's going to be quite a bit of money going to those manufacturers. It's just pretty simple. That's what's going to happen. And these law enforcement agencies, one, are going to have to adhere to AB 876, as well as they are going to be compensated for adhering to it. And when these new microstamped handguns flood into California's market and get added to the roster, all of a sudden, that safe handgun roster that's already so limited in California is going to reduce, and some of your favorite handguns that we are limited to having already right now are going to fall off the list because of prior laws in AB 2847. So if you live in California, I highly recommend you reach out to your local representatives. I will be doing the same. Let them know you don't agree with AB 876, as well as the downstream effects that passing this bill will have on California gun owners like me and you. Also, I'm going to mention real quick that the Armed in May event will be happening this weekend, May 8th and May 9th. You can come out either day. Come out, meet me, meet Reno May, hang out with us, shoot some guns, meet some really cool vendors. There's going to be food out there, all that stuff, as well as there's going to be a ton of giveaways from a ton of sponsors. So it should be a really good time. And if you live in California, you want to come hang out with us, meet us, just to have a good time, support the Second Amendment, all of that in California, I highly recommend you come out to the event. I'll put a link in the detail section to all the information you will need, and I'm really excited to meet a lot of you guys out there at the event. So if you guys have any questions, go ahead and comment down below, and I'll try to answer to the best of my ability. Also, if you guys like this video and like support the channel, one of the best ways to do that is to like, comment, subscribe, and make sure to hit that notification bell, because that helps the channel analytics, helps us spread the word about the Second Amendment, and also spread the word about 2A infringements like this that are going on in the state of California. So as always, thank you all for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And never forget, this nation was built by armed scholars, and this nation will be maintained by armed scholars.